Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted, as always, to be joined by Gregory Dahl. It is 10 years since the first Carl Froch and George Groves fight, a fight that ended controversially, a fight that had fantastic build-up, and a fight that kind of delivered with that fantastic build-up in what was a fight of the year taking place at the MEN Arena. Greg, always good to analyse fights with you, whether it's happened yesterday or happened 10 years ago. And looking forward to getting our teeth stuck into this one. First question is what springs to mind when I say Froch Groves? Is it kind of the knockout at Wembley Stadium? Is it the controversial finish in the first fight? Is it George Groves playing with the Rubik's Cube at a press conference? Is it the push and the pull hand thing? What one moment, whether it's inside or out the ring, springs to mind for yourself?
Elliot, thanks so much for having me as always. I don't mean to be negative, but Howard Foster, I don't know why. I think there was just so much made of that first stoppage, Elliot, that it just kind of stays with you. There was a lot of things said, the push and the pull, the Rubik's Cube, Groves promising Froch that he would land two right hands in the first fight, the bus entrance and the rematch, the way the fight finished in the rematch. It was just a great rivalry, Elliot, and there's so many talking points from it.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think the two of them were made for each other inside and outside the ring. Really, I think just the chemistry between them, whether it's the gloves are off with Johnny Nelson, or just the two fights they had, very different fights, but both intriguing fights for different reasons. Going to go straight into the first fight. That's the fight we're talking about. Maybe when it's the 10-year anniversary of the second fight, we'll do another video. We've identified three key moments, three key rounds here. Might be obvious to a lot of people who know this fight well what the first moment is, but I will let you take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. So the first thing from the first fight, unbelievable. I remember sitting on the couch that night at home watching it, and I think that they showed things in like the studios in Sky, people jumping up and they were like, whoa, like they couldn't believe it when Groves landed that dynamite right hand on Froch's iron chin that looked almost unbreakable, apart from a nothing knockdown against Jermaine Taylor. Let's be honest, he got back up and he was okay. But this knockdown looked heavy. And I just remember sitting watching that night, Elliot, and thinking, he's got to be finished here. That was such a heavy right hand. So yeah, the first moment in the fight that I want to talk to you about is the right hand that knocked Carl Froch down. It was a moment that will live in British boxing, I think, for a long, long time. Very, very monumental moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think I can't remember what Adam Smith said exactly. I think did he say this arena's become electrified or something like that? And he was true. I like whether you like Adam Smith or not. I think look that sort of noise that came from the crowd in the arena that night. I question if that sort of noise can come from another sport. Genuinely, it was quite something. It must have been quite something to have been in the arena that night. There were one question I do want to ask you, Greg. As you mentioned, heavy knockdown. By the time Froch gets back up, there's about 10 more seconds in the round. He actually does take more punches before the bell goes. If there had been, say, another 30 seconds in that round rather than 10, do you think Groves could have stopped it there and then, or do you think Froch would have hung on?
I think you definitely could have put him down again, Elliot. Carl Froch is just a warrior. I don't ever see Carl Froch as being this guy who goes out and getting stopped on his back or being unable to continue. It just feels strange to think in Carl Froch in that light, and that's a compliment to him. But if that round had been 30 seconds longer, I do see Groves potentially knocking him down again because look when the bell rang at the end of the first round. I think Groves had landed another two right hands, and when the bell actually rings, I think Froch's hands are out here, and his brain's shaking. So yeah, I think if there was another 30 seconds, I think he could have found himself in a bit of trouble in that round.
Yeah, crazy. We're gonna fast forward a bit now.
Yeah.
I think obviously, look, Groves had won the majority of the rounds up to this stage.
Yeah.
And I think we were starting to question who was going to win this fight. Obviously, remembering Groves went into the fight as the underdog. Um, I'll let you take it away with the round that we're discussing here.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. So the round that I want to discuss is round number 6. Elliot, this round for me is not talked about enough in the first fight. This is a monumental round because it's one of those rounds again, if we look back at it. George Groves is landing a lot of right hands. He's really, really giving it to Carl Froch. And there's times where Froch in the round, he looks a little bit shaken, but he gets through it. And you can just see the energy raining from Groves because there's an attack in round 6 from Froch. And it's a little bit of a combination. I think it's body head. He's just kind of throwing and not really thinking, but he knows that he has to start coming out of his comfort zone and not overthinking the shots. And Groves wilts a little bit against the ropes. And yet again, that man, Adam Smith, you can hear a bit of the commentary. They say that basically they think Groves is a bit hurt. And I just think towards the end of that round, you can see a momentum change. You can see George Groves basically saying to himself, I don't think this guy's going to go anywhere, and I've hit him with absolutely everything. And I think he put a lot into round 6, Elliot, and I think that might have been why he seemed a little bit depleted also. But what a monumental round, because I think Carl Froch grew in confidence, and I think George Groves maybe emptied his tank a little bit in that round, and it was just a slight shift and change to the fight.
Yeah, definitely. I think I was going to ask you actually, what do you think would have gone through George Groves' mind then? But you've answered it, and I think you're absolutely right. I think I'm sure we agree here. We've kind of looked at the build up in the past and the post fight interviews and things like that. There's so much content out there for both fights.
Yeah.
And there was one interview that I think Carl Froch said about the first fight. He just said, yeah, hit me down in the first round, and the first 3 or 4 rounds, he bashed me about, beat me up really. But towards in the second half of the fight, he was still hitting me, but the punches stopped hurting, i.e. Groves was just kind of beginning to run out of steam, / had just hit Carl Froch with everything he had done and only managed to put him down once. So I think you're right there. It was a big round. I think a lot of people would say that kind of George Groves obviously still won the round, but maybe kind of Carl Froch would have won the round in some sense, in the fact that how he maybe learned more from the round, and as you said, gained confidence. Fast forwarding again, Greg, obviously we're moving to the obvious point here. Very controversial stoppage. People still debate to this day, including Carl Froch and George Groves, over whether the fight should have been stopped or not. Just going to hand it back to you to talk us through the stoppage and, of course, your opinion on whether it should have been stopped or not.
Elliot, fights like this, you get drawn into them, and at the time, your heart overrules your head a little bit. Now, I'm going to put this out because I can hear the viewers saying, "Oh my God, you don't agree with that stoppage, do you?" No, I don't. I think the fight should have went longer, but I remember being like really angry at the time of the stoppage and thinking that doesn't deserve to be stopped. Similar to round 6, you can see Groves is starting to wilt. If you look at when Howard Foster stops the fight, George Groves, when Howard Foster tries to grab a hold of him, he does lose his footing a little bit and lands back on the ropes. That's a guy who's really, really tired and probably isn't a million miles away from being stopped in a fight. But the question you asked me is basically, should that fight have been stopped there and then? Was it a fair stoppage? The answer is no. I think it should have been. He should have been given a little bit longer. A fight's a fight. He had done so well in the fight up until then, and I just think it was a little bit. Well, I think most of the country, I think it was a little bit robbing of George Groves not to have that definitive ending to a fight where he put in a fantastic performance. Really, really great performance. One of the best that I've seen in a British ring for a kid coming through as an underdog that is looked upon as he's not got a chin. Froch is going to stop him inside 6 rounds. Probably doesn't even need to train that hard for it. For the fight to be stopped that way, Elliot, you were heartbroken for him. It was horrible, but it's a piece of history now, isn't it? So yeah, yeah, really, really thoughtful stoppage.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm a believer that the referee, you need to consider the circumstances when you stop a fight. And I think if you consider Groves was winning the fight, we were in the final third of the fight. It was a world title fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think if Groves had been bashed around for 6, 7 rounds, yeah, fair enough. Stop the fight. If it's not a world title fight, fair enough. But I just think in the circumstances, the fight, the fight should have continued, and we should have seen a more conclusive ending. I think that's what people, the main thing people moaned about. Couple more questions I've got for you, Greg. How did you have the fight at the end of 8 rounds? I think I'll be honest, I can't remember the exact scorecards, but I think a couple of the scorecards were maybe closer than some people than some people watching at home had. Yeah, how did you have it at the end of the eighth round?
Going back 10 years, Elliot, it's yeah. I've watched the fight a few times, but as we get on, we more focus on the really big moments, the highlights in the fight. Sometimes those are like 20 minutes long. You can get a good idea from each round. I remember at the time I didn't give Carl Froch an awful lot at all. I think I scored it about at the time. Just say we're not scoring the ninth round. I had about 6-2 or 7-1. I just thought Groves outworked him most of the rounds, outlanded him, and it was very hard to give Froch an awful lot in the fight. But when the fight was stopped, you just knew that Carl Froch was coming on, and he was probably going to pick up that round, the next round, if it went that far, the 11th. And as you know, it's one of those ones where Carl Froch is just a tremendous 12-round fighter. So you had to really favour that he would come on strong in the last quarter of the fight. So to answer your question, Elliot, maybe about 6-2, 7-1, but probably around about 6-2.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Worth mentioning, obviously we had rest of round 9 and 3 rounds left after that, so there was plenty of time for Froch to get a stoppage in a different part of the fight, score a knockdown. Maybe if if Froch had really dominated that final third of the fight, a lot of people maybe could have even seen him winning the fight on points. Final question before we sign off, Greg. Howard Foster doesn't jump in and stop the fight. There's a minute and a half remaining in round number 9. What happens? Does George Groves see the end of the round out? Does Froch stop him later in the fight? Does George Groves carry on to win the fight? I know it's a tricky question, and we're in fantasy world here, but yeah, what do you think happens?
Elliot, it's a great question because it's really got me thinking. I'm the first one to say, don't let your heart overrule your head. And I'm trying not to do that now. I think it's hard to see beyond maybe Froch towards the end of round 9, 10, maximum 11, get George Groves out of there. I think George Groves, to his credit, do you know what? I really like both fighters. I think George Groves had just fought his fight. I think he had done as best as he could in the fight. He was ahead. He fought better than anyone could ever give him credit for. But I just think he had used so much energy in the first half of that fight, and rightly so, because Froch is a slow starter. He always has been, he always was. So I find it hard to see beyond Carl Froch getting him out of there at some point. I would probably have said that he may have had him in trouble towards the end of round 9, big trouble, and come out for round 10. I think it would have been stopped then, but who knows, Elliot? But I think maybe round 10 Froch is probably where I'm likely to go.
Fair enough, and we'll leave it there. Been very nostalgic talking about this,
Yeah.
Greg. Look, one of the great British domestic rivalries ever. Look, one of the best fights to happen in Britain in the last 10 years, arguably the best. And yeah, I'm sure we could talk all day about it, but we'll leave it there. Greg, thank you very much for joining me, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Elliot.